Coach Corey Wayne, and this is my video coaching newsletter. And the topic of today's newsletter is going to be the Pulse Nightclub terror attack in Orlando. Well, I've been getting, obviously, I was taking this past week off, taking a break, and obviously, right when I decided to do that, this thing happened in Orlando, which is really down the street because, as many of you know, I live in downtown Orlando. And so I got up last Sunday morning after spending the evening out with some friends, having dinner, and just having a good time. It was interesting as I was going to bed right around 2 o'clock when this whole thing was starting to go down. And so I woke up, started checking some of the news sites that I usually do in the mornings, kind of part of my morning routine, see what's going on in the world. And I saw a terror attack in Orlando, like everywhere. I thought, what the hell is this? So I started looking into it, and I saw where it was, and I looked over to my left, and I could see the crime scene. I mean, it's about 1.5 miles down the road from where I'm at, but I'm in a high-rise, so I'm pretty high up. And so I could see all the cars and all the media trucks out there, and quite frankly, it fucking pissed me off. And so as I'm coming back from my little break, I'm doing videos, and I've been getting emails all week, and plus I've been, people asking me to discuss this, and like, why would this guy do something like this? What would possess a human being to go and mow down 49 or 100 other people, basically killing 49 of them? And so that's what I've chosen to do today's video on. So I have a quote that I wrote, and I've got probably a page or two worth of just little bullet points. So I'm going to go through a lot of things, going back about 1,500 years. I'm going to discuss some things regarding some history because, quite frankly, when I listen to people talk about this particular subject, because this is on everybody's minds, and just last November we had the thing in Paris where 130-something people were murdered in Paris, just totally defenseless people, in a society that has completely outlawed assault rifles, if you will, but yet criminals managed to get their hands on AK-47s. What a fucking shock. Criminals that don't follow the law. So I thought I would go through this because so many people they don't know their asshole from a hole in the ground. So I've been listening as things have been coming out about this particular shooter and his worldview, and so I wanted to go and discuss this because a lot of people have been asking me about it. So I have a quote that I wrote because this is really going to key into the 6 human needs of why people do what they do. And so the quote says, human beings have 6 basic fundamental needs that they are always trying to meet through their thoughts, words, and deeds. The first need is the desire for certainty. This means that you're certain that you have a roof over your head, a job, money, where your next meal is coming from, etc. The second need is variety. In other words, we like to have a variety of different experiences and people in life instead of every day being exactly the same. The third need is love and connection. This is simply bonding with, connecting to, and loving other people. The fourth need is significance. This means that you are important, that you matter, and your life has meaning. The fifth need is growth. This is growing as a person, expanding your knowledge, your skills, etc. The sixth need is contribution. This is doing things for other people by focusing on helping and contributing to the welfare of others. You'll actually meet all of the 6 other human needs in the process. That's basically what my whole business is about, is taking all the things that I've learned in my life, my spiritual studies, self-help studies, business, dating skills, pickup skills, relationship skills, quality of life, taking care of your body, eating a certain type of alkaline type diet, to give you the best possible ability to achieve the things you want in your life and create the life and lifestyle that you want. Because the choices that you have, they're not going to be the same as the choices or things that I want or anybody else for that matter. So with that said, I'm going to just start going through all these different bullet points. I've been writing these things down over the past week, things that were pertinent and I want to discuss. And the first thing that is really mind-boggling to me is if you look at TV and you see what the media is talking about, everything is about, as a matter of fact, before I was sitting down to shoot this video, there's some dude flying around in a plane downtown that's something like, it has a big picture of a gun on his big banner he's dragging behind his plane, and it says something like, "In gun violence." So in other words, you know, this is every time there's a shooting of any kind, people come out and say, well, if we just didn't have guns, these kinds of things wouldn't happen. And that's asinine and stupid. I'm not going to get into, because I did a whole video on the Second Amendment, why it exists. I'm not going to rehash all that here. But the first thing I have written down is prohibition did not work. In the 1930s, when they banned alcohol, what happened? You had speakeasies popping up. You had the mafia took over. You had things like the St. Valentine's Day Massacre where they mowed down like 14, I think it was 14 people if I remember right. I don't remember. I'm sure somebody will correct me in the comments. But the bottom line is you had guys like Al Capone that took over because people didn't want to give up their booze, whether it was whiskey or beer. They weren't fucking giving it up. And eventually, the country realized, you know what, this is not a good idea. All these people are getting killed because all you have is this criminal element. And so they did away with it. People were happy. Bottom line, it didn't work. You look at the war on drugs. How well is that working out for us? Billions and billions of dollars, and what's the result? Right now in the United States, we've got a heroin epidemic that is just way out of fucking control. And what typically starts people down those paths is all the prescription drugs that they get from opiates and other things. I mean, the singer Prince, he just died of a drug overdose from popping pills. And if you look at what's happening in some of the cities where the drug overdoses are really bad, they're actually teaching police officers how to use a little injector when they find somebody that's OD'd to shoot it up his nose, because that counteracts the effects of the opiates, and they're able, if they get to them in time, to save that person's life. And me personally, I mean, it's like people talk about, especially like weed these days. It's all being legalized. It's fucking everywhere. It's not even making a dent. And if you look at like what Portugal has done, they legalized everything, and they spend their money now in law enforcement to help people that are addicts. And what's interesting is that their rate of people they have that are getting hooked on drugs is like half of what it was. Like Germany's got some great programs. And what I think is awesome is that people in our correctional institutions in the States are actually going over to Germany to see how it's not so much focused on locking people up for crimes. They're focused on rehabilitating people. And that is the way our society needs to go, because that's working better than anything. You ban anything in life, people that want to do it are going to fucking do it. And if you ban guns, I mean, there's like I hear 300 million to 500 million is the amount of guns in the States. And quite frankly, most people, myself included, we ain't giving up our fucking guns. That's just the way it is. It's guaranteed by the Constitution and the Second Amendment. But everybody's, you know, they go right back into the corners. You get the gun control crowd, and you get the crowd that doesn't want to do anything. They don't want the laws to be changed. In the meantime, we continue to ignore people. Who's committing these crimes? You got mentally ill people, or you got jihadis committing these crimes. The handful of people, and they do things to get noticed, and nobody pays attention to that. Same thing's happening right now. Everybody's talking about if we just ban a certain type of weapon, it'll work. That is fucking bullshit. And if that would have actually been something that would work, Paris would have never happened. France is a mostly disarmed society, and they certainly don't allow assault rifles. Well, the jihadis didn't fucking care that assault rifles were banned in France. Actually, to them, it was like, this is great. People are fucking sitting ducks, because the chances of anybody being armed, it's just, they're not going to run into somebody else with a gun. And that's just reality. And as Ayn Rand said, you can ignore reality, but you can't ignore the consequences of ignoring reality. At the end of the day, criminals don't follow the laws. That's reality. And another thing that we all need to consider, I don't know if you've been paying attention to 3D printing advances, but there was a guy, I think it was about 2 years ago, he printed out a gun that he made. I think that he uses a nail as like the firing pin in it. And then the FBI and Homeland Security said, hey, you know what? We really would like it if you would take those plans off the internet, even though they were spread everywhere. But you got to figure 5-10 years from now, as 3D printing continues to advance, anybody's going to be able to go and buy a 3D printer and print out not only an AR-15, which is the one people always bitch about in the news, but they're going to be able to print out machine guns and everything else that they want. So as a society, humanity is going to have to deal with the fact that people anywhere on the planet or in the next decade or so are going to be able to print out military-style weapons in their fucking garage or in their little den or their office. And there's not a fucking thing anybody can do about it. And we better get real fucking serious real quick about the reasons why people are killing and who is doing the killing, because it ain't members of the NRA that are doing the killing, and it ain't law-abiding citizens, even though all the politicians and the pundits and the media want to come after the people that have guns. That's just fucking reality. We can stick our heads in the sand all we want, but we have a problem that's only going to get worse, and if we don't pay attention to the causes of it as a society, a lot more fucking people are going to be dying. So the next thing I have on my list of bullet points I'm going to go with you is that we have to focus on the elimination of jihad preachers and teachers and purveyors, and in their place offer a positive, loving, more compelling vision for those who have lost hope, those who have no hope, or those who need a purpose in life. When you look at people, you look at someone like Zarqawi, who was the leader of Al-Qaeda in Iraq until we took him out with a 500-pounder in 2006. You notice in all the videos, if you ever seen any of the videos of him, he always had long sleeves on. Well, he was a petty criminal. He was from Jordan. He was in and out of jail his whole life. His arms were completely covered in jailhouse tattoos. He was into drugs, all kinds of different things. And then all of a sudden he found radical Islam, which justified his living a gangster lifestyle, like something right out of the game Grand Theft Auto, if you will. And then when he was taken out, because I followed the blogs of the guys that were on the front lines. Anytime Petraeus went and testified, and he was on C-SPAN or Odierno, or guys like Dr. Kilcullen, who was one of the Petraeus' right-hand man, whenever those guys would testify, I'd always listen to it. And so after Zarqawi was killed, I think it was sometime around 2007, there was a guy that came along, that al-Baghdadi dude. Nobody had any pictures of him. We just heard about him, that he was the new guy running Al-Qaeda in Iraq. And obviously we really didn't get to see what this guy looked like until he climbed up the stairs in Mosul back, I think it was 2014, when the Islamic State took over Mosul. That was the first time we actually, and then come to find out, we had this guy in custody. He was in, I think it was Camp Bucca, Iraq, or one of those other places where, one of those prisons that we had, he was there. And he made a lot of contacts in prison. Those people all later joined his organization. The other thing you look at is, I don't know if you've ever heard of the city Sanford, which is only about 15 minutes up the road from downtown Orlando. There was a mosque up there, and there was a preacher, and it's been all over the internet, it's been all over the news. There's a guy up there, I think he's Iranian is his background, and I'll have the video posted on my site. It's only 2-3 minutes long. It was like Channel 9 locally here did a piece on this guy. And so this guy was preaching, and to his this congregation, sounding very educated, very smart, making a very rational argument that the compassionate thing to do is to kill all gays and lesbians, and to not feel embarrassed about that. You cannot have people going around the country preaching this kind of fucking bullshit and then justifying it with different parts of the Quran or the Sunnah or the Hadith. Because when you come across somebody like this guy that pulled off this thing in Orlando, if you look into his history, he's a self-hating, self-loathing, suicidal failure. And what's interesting is that they've gone back to people that went to school with him. And, you know, when we all graduate high school, typically in the States, what happened, you get voted like most likely to succeed, most likely to get married, most likely this or that. He got voted most likely to become a terrorist. And it's like, if you look at this guy's record, it was just a matter of time before he became a jihadi. His father supports the Taliban, and of course he was an immigrant
that we brought over here, his father also used to call him a closet homosexual. He called him a fag. He called him gay all the time. And a lot of people have come out and said, hey, I met this dude on a gay dating app a couple years ago, and apparently he was also frequented the Pulse Nightclub. So it's obvious that this guy internally really was a gay man, but his belief, his ideology, his family told him what a sin that was, how horrible that was. Remember the 6 human needs. We all want to be loved. We want to love and connect with other people. We want certainty. We want some variety. We want to feel significant and that we're important. And this guy goes down in a blaze of glory as a way that he decided was to redeem himself. Because it was easy to say, you know what, all these homosexual feelings that he was having, he decided that it was because of all these gays in society exist and they haven't all been killed off. That's the way he looked at it. He felt ashamed of his belief. He wasn't allowed to come out and be who he really was, so he suppressed it. And he got married. His first wife said what an abusive jackass he was. And now it looks like his second wife, the one who was married, may have somehow been an accomplice. So his final act in life was to kill a bunch of gays, and that way he redeems himself for the fact that he was constantly hitting on other gay men because he was gay himself. So what did he do? He projected his self-hatred and self-loathing. Remember, I've talked about this many times in other videos. We, human beings, tend to attack in other people things that those people are connected to within themselves that they're disconnected from. So in other words, if I'm happy and I love my life and I'm excited, somebody who's miserable, who's unhappy and doesn't like their life is going to say, ah, fucking Corey, he's always smiling, he's always dick, he's this, he's that. Or somebody that has money and then the other person doesn't have money. They talk shit about people that have money. Why? Because they don't have any. In other words, we attack in other people what we're disconnected from within ourselves. And so what does he do? He goes and he shoots up this gay nightclub because he's completely disconnected from that. The people in the gay nightclub, they're out, they're proud of who they are, they don't apologize for it, and that's something that he simply cannot do and is not able to do because his religious beliefs do not allow him to do that. Can you imagine the torment? And for those of you guys out there that had one time were like I used to be, where you wanted to date the kind of women that you want, and every time you get a second or third date, they won't return your fucking phone calls after that, that's incredibly frustrating. So just imagine a man who goes through his whole life and he can't be who he really is. And he's surrounded by people that tell him how evil and awful those particular kinds of thoughts happen to be. I mean, it's pretty common sense when you look at it, when you understand things from that perspective, why this guy chose to do that. Well, you see on people on TV, it's like, oh, I don't understand why somebody would be so crazy and do something like this. Just makes no sense. It makes complete sense. When you understand why people do what they do, if you understand what's in my book, it's pretty easy to connect the dots. It's just simply a matter of time before a guy like that decide just something snaps in him and he says, that's it. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna redeem myself, because he hated the way he felt. He hated the fact that he felt this way. He projected it onto other people who were connected to what he was disconnected from and afraid to embrace himself. And so anytime in life we have something that we believe or that we want or we think the world should be a certain way, we look for justification. That's why for those of you who are single, your married friends or your friends that are in a relationship are telling you why you need to get a girlfriend or why you need to get married as well. And vice versa. If you're a married person or you're in a relationship, you live with your girlfriend, your boyfriend or whatever, and you got people that are single, like, come on, man, party like a rock star. Let's go out. Let's go pick up some girls. Or if you're a woman, let's go pick up some guys. No matter what we do as human beings in life, we always want other people to make the same choices. Because when we do, we feel better about our decisions. And so if somebody's self-hating, self-loathing, suicidal, they're miserable, and they come across radical Islam, it gives them a belief system that justifies their worldview. oh, okay, the reason why the world is so fucked up is because we got so many gays, we got so many infidels, and we got all these people that haven't accepted Islam yet. And if I do this, I'm going to live in paradise for the rest of my life with my 72 virgins, and it's going to be fucking great. What's interesting about that is a couple weeks ago, there were some I guess, Islamic scholars that have come out and said there was a mistranslation. It's not 72 virgins, it was 72 raisins. I thought that was pretty funny when I heard that. Tyrants and those who think like tyrants believe that they are superior to their fellow human beings, that people are too stupid to know what is good for them, and tyrants fulfill their need for significance by convincing themselves that they and people like them should be telling the rest of us how we should live our lives and what we should and should not be allowed to do. Tyrants do not respect the freedom of the individual or their divine birthright guaranteed by the Constitution and Bill of Rights to life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, and the right of self-determination. Again, like I discussed in my video on the right to keep and bear arms, what is a right? A right is something that nobody else can take away from you. People who feel out of control and fearful seek to control others and impose their will and belief systems upon them. It's like you look at people, it doesn't matter what country you're from, you look at the politicians, it's like once they get elected, it's like, I don't know what it is overseas, but I know in the States, 96% of all incumbents get reelected. Doesn't matter what party. We keep reelecting 96% of the same fucking people. And then we go, nothing ever changes. Our system is broken. There's something wrong with our Constitution. It's actually good that they can't get anything done because it's like Tacitus said, and I posted on Instagram recently, the more corrupt the state, the more it legislates. Something to think about. People who truly care about the safety, security, and welfare of their fellow human beings are focused on eliminating the reasons why killers kill and stopping them before they kill. They are not focused on punishing law-abiding citizens. I'm a big supporter of the law enforcement directive where and I'll have I wrote it, in the Mother Jones article, I included it in the right to keep and bear arms, and also will include it on the article on my website where you can actually go and see what law enforcement is actually doing to recognize who is most likely to bring a gun to school or to commit a mass shooting, and they give them therapy, they give them counseling, they help them reconnect with society, because that's the real problem. These people, whether it's the mentally ill person or the jihadi, they feel disconnected from society. They don't feel like they fit in. They look at the world and they see that there's something wrong with it. But the reality, there's nothing wrong with the world. It's the way they look at the world. It's the belief system, the worldview that they have. And eventually they get to a point and they can't take it anymore and they lash out and they attack. There are 400 million guns in the U.S. Like I said, I've seen estimates between 300 and as high as 500 million. There's probably even more than that. I know, like, my grandfather, I can't remember how he was, 30-something guns I think he ended up having. He'd been accumulating them his whole life. He loved to shoot. He was in the military. He was in the Navy during World War II. He grew up with guns. Having a gun was like having a hammer in a toolbox. Again, I discussed that at length in the right to keep and bear arms, so I'm not going to go through it. To me personally, when you live in a society with 400 million guns, and some people have that, oh, it's a gun, what do I do? Oh, they're bad. In my opinion, and this may piss some people off, but I don't fucking care. If some of the things I say piss you off, you really need to examine what you're thinking and what you're feeling internally. Because I believe parents and people in general, you have to be an idiot. You have to be delusional if you think it's a good idea to not know how to handle a gun responsibly when either you encounter it or an idiot that doesn't know how to handle a gun, or people who have them, or your kids. Your job as a parent is to prepare your kids. Even if you choose not to have guns in your own house, which that is totally your right, you have to assume that at some point your kid is going to probably encounter somebody that has a gun. And if you haven't prepared them, if you haven't taught them how to safely handle them and respect them, you shouldn't be surprised if something bad happens. You know, it's like what John Wayne said in one of his movies. Life's tough, pilgrim, and it's even tougher if you're stupid. You have to prepare yourself, and you have to prepare your kids. Maybe you buy a house one day and you're up in the attic and then you find a loaded gun up there. If you don't know what the hell it is, or one of your kids playing around in the attic and he doesn't know what the hell it is, I mean, those things happen. Even if you decide you don't want guns, that's fine, that's cool. But you don't have the right to think like a tyrant and say, we're just going to ban all these things. Again, especially with 3D printing. And you look at the fact that, I mean, if you got a small child now, and when your child grows up, and when they become a teenager, they're going to encounter kids that got a 3D printer and they're printing out all kinds of weapons. What do you do then to prepare your children? The world is a dangerous fucking place. You have to be prepared. Why you must name your enemy. I saw Barack Obama, our president, you could tell Trump totally got under his fucking skin the other day when he started condescendingly talking about, well, saying the names radical Islam or radical jihadist terrorism is just stupid, it's pointless. Well, when we fought World War II, who were we fighting? We weren't fighting extremism. We were fighting the Nazis. We were fighting fascism. You have to define your enemy. You have to define the ideology. And you have to root it out. What we need to do, and there's been a lot of really great suggestions here, and things that have worked in the past. We need to make jihad and their radical belief system a pariah like kiddie porn is. If jihad was treated worldwide like kiddie porn, it would cease to be a problem. And this was one that I saw Newt Gingrich suggest. And this is something that we actually did during World War II. We formed a congressional committee to root out, like we did the Nazis. And we formed a congressional committee to go after all the people that are preaching this radical jihad. Because think about it, if you got a person that goes to a mosque, you know, his family's Muslim, and then you got somebody in there teaching all this radical Islamic stuff, and this person is suicidal, they hate themselves, they're miserable, they're not very successful, and this guy says, here's the reason why we have all these problems in the world. The problems is, the reason why the world is so fucked up is because everybody doesn't have Islam. And if you just become a mass murderer, you'll redeem yourself, and you'll have all these great things in the afterlife, it'll be wonderful. Eventually, this propaganda is so fucking good, it's convincing people to strap bombs onto themselves, to blow themselves up, to commit mass murder, to crash planes into buildings. I mean, have you ever really sat down and thought, what does it take for another human being to commit suicide in the process of killing other people? I mean, that's a pretty strong fucking belief system for somebody to adopt that. To hop into a car that's an improvised explosive device and drive it into a roadblock and blow themselves up. And if you see what's going on over in Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, the whole Libya even now, I mean, these people are driving, I mean, it's like the kamikazes were that our grandfathers and great-grandfathers fought during World War II. If you look at what drove the kamikaze, the word kamikaze meant divine wind. And, you know, the old saying, those that don't study history are destined to repeat it. You think, why would people hop in an airplane that is mostly a flying bomb and fly themselves into an aircraft carrier or a destroyer or a frigate or a group of troops? What would possess somebody to do that? Well, for those of you that don't know, during World War II, the Emperor Hirohito of Japan, he was considered God incarnate. He was a divine being. In other words, he was the creator of heaven and earth. And people were taught to worship him as a divine being. And so therefore, if you became a kamikaze, part of the divine wind, if you will, and flew your plane into an aircraft carrier, you would be rewarded in the afterlife. And because these people had a whole culture built around the Emperor of Japan being a deity, they believed it. They believed they were doing God's will. That's why by the thousands they committed mass suicide in their planes. They even had submarines that they would literally drive the submarine into the side of the hull of a ship to try to sink it. They would blow themselves up in the process. But what happened? And after the war, our General Douglas MacArthur, and because Hirohito, he was part of the group. We went after the guys like Tojo, who all the military leadership of Imperial Japan after we had won the war. And Hirohito came out and he said, "I'm just a human being. I'm not a god. I'm just another man like the rest of us." We had to destroy the ideology. And on top of that, we didn't just say, "All right, you're good luck. You're on your own." We actually stayed and we rebuilt all of Japan. And we had one of our foremost experts, Dr. Edward Deming, I believe. His last name was Deming, and I think it was Edward Deming. He was an expert on quality. And so he was relentless in teaching and making it part of their culture when they were manufacturing things. You look at how Japan came back after the war. I mean, back in the 70s and the 80s, I mean, Japanese cars, I mean, were way better built than American cars. We had everything, any kind of electronics, the Sony Walkman, all that stuff came from the Japanese. And that was because of Dr. Edward Deming and teaching the Japanese people to focus on quality in all of their businesses, their manufacturing pursuits, and they were obsessed with it. Whereas you got cars coming off the assembly lines in the United States and they're banging the fenders into place with hammers and stuff. The Japanese, they just bolted right on and they fit perfectly. There was no beating the things into shape. That's how bad things had gotten in our manufacturing sector. They got lazy. And the Japanese totally kicked our fucking asses in the manufacturing sector. We must delegitimize the Islamic State and all those who believe in this savage ideology. Obama gives them credibility because he allows them to exist. Remember, you've heard me talk about this in the past, that people have a herd mentality. 50 to 60% of the population, they just do what everybody else is doing. And when you allow an Islamic State like this to exist and expand, it gives them legitimacy. They say, hey, we're doing God's will. We're imposing Islam on the whole planet. We're going to completely take over and run everything. And by the way, you get sex slaves. You get money. You get everything. You get to live like a king. You're an emir. Join us. We're taking over the world in essence. And nobody's doing anything to stop them. They go, maybe this is right. Maybe we should follow these guys. It gives them credibility. Every day they're allowed to exist. That's why if there was no Islamic State, the chances of this guy having shut up the nightclub last week would have been significantly reduced. The preachers are so easy to track down, and so are those who are susceptible to buying into the jihad if you know what to look for. Again, if we make this ideology or preaching this extreme version of Islam, if we make it just like kiddie porn, then there won't be people preaching this. And so somebody goes into a mosque who would, under normal circumstances, the way things are today, would be able to get radicalized. He'd be able to go into a mosque and there'd be a compassionate imam there that'll get him therapy, get him counseling, help him reconnect to other people, maybe help him get a job, may help him become a valuable member of society. But instead, there's no place for them to go in most cases. And like I said, in my own city, you got people running around preaching this jihad. And what was interesting about this mosque in Sanford, their attitude is, hey, fuck you. We'll have anybody come and speak here, whoever we want. I mean, this shit ain't happening in the Catholic Church. This ain't happening in Scientology. This ain't happening in Buddhism. Like it or not, the world is at war with radical Islam and has been for the past 1,300 years. Until the ideology is defeated and has no legitimacy, this will not go away. I wish it was different. I wish I was making a video about something else. But 49 of my fucking neighbors got gunned down the street for where I live. We can't fucking ignore it. As much as we want to, as much as we wish we could just sit around a campfire and sing happy songs and sing Kumbaya, that's just not the world we live in right now. And as far as the United States goes, we've been fighting jihad since our founding, since the Barbary Wars. The Barbary Wars were from the early, was it 1801 to 1815, I think it was. There were two of them. And guess where it came from? Libya, modern-day Libya. You had the Barbary pilots. They were all Islamists, and what was happening was these Islamists were raiding our ships, and they were taking our women that were on the ships as slaves. They were stealing the cargo. And so we initially went over there and said, great, we'll pay you a bunch of money, just stop fucking around. Because even all over Europe, people's kids and their family were getting kidnapped by these pirates off the coast of Libya, and they were paying these huge sums of ransom, which were being raised in the churches and in the different villages over in Europe. And it was a scourge. So what do? We sent the fucking Marines over there to kick their asses. And what did the Marines do? They kicked their fucking asses. If you look at the Marine hymn, the shores of Tripoli, that's where it comes from. And so we kicked their asses, and the Sultan was like, no, okay, we're sorry, we won't do this shit anymore. And so we packed our shit up, the Marines packed their shit, and they left. And almost as soon as we left, they went right back to doing it because they're like, hey, the Quran tells us to do this. We're going to do it anyways, fuck you. So we sent the Marines back, we reinvaded, and we kicked their asses all over again. And they said, okay, this time we really mean it. We're sorry, we won't do it anymore. And they stopped. What we have is we have a 1,300-year-long war with only slight lulls in the fighting, which happens only when the radicals are weak and moderates are strong. We must offer a more loving, successful, inclusive, peaceful vision. Peace through strength. As they say, if you want peace, prepare for war. If you want war, prepare for peace. I am totally in agreement that as long as we have the toughest, strongest, baddest motherfucking fighting force in the history of mankind, people will not fuck with us. People respect strength, especially in the Muslim world, which happens to mostly be a tribal type of society. They only respect strength. If you look at what the United States did when we were staying in Iraq before Barack Obama pulled us all out, we were the strongest tribe. And so if the Sunnis had a problem with the Shias, they could come to the Americans, and the Americans could go to the Shias and say, look, because there was a time during, I think it was 2008 if I remember right, Maliki wanted to go and use their military to oppress some of the Sunnis because they weren't going along with what they wanted. And General Petraeus said, if you launch your helicopters, we will shoot them out of the fucking sky. And he knew he was serious. But once we left, there was no longer a mediator. And look what happened. Panetta, Obama's Secretary of Defense, he was also Bill Clinton's Chief of Staff. Secretary Gates, who was the Secretary of Defense under George Bush, and for the first 2-3 years of Obama's first term, he was Secretary of Defense. His national security team, General Petraeus, General Odierno, who were the leaders during the surge in Iraq to turn the Iraq war around, everybody in the military said, do not pull our troops out. It will completely implode, and it'll be sectarian war between the Sunnis, the Shias, and the Kurds. Don't do it. And what did he do? He and Ben Rhodes, who he mind melded with, as Ben Rhodes has said recently, I don't know if you've seen the New York Times story about that, they said, no, the United States is a bully, we're a colonial problem, and if we just leave, everything will be great. And what happened? Well, the Middle East is on fire because of his incompetence. That's what happens when you have an ideologue instead of a competent manager. He sees his ideology, and until he sees his ideology ain't working, he ain't fucking changing. That's why we've had to, in essence, reinvade Iraq and Syria again to clean up the fucking mess. And then we're going to have to rebuild Iraq for the second fucking time already. I had so many friends over there. I had a friend that got blown up in Iraq in 2006. He lost an eye. It's like, oh. We've got to separate, as General Petraeus said, the reconcilables from the irreconcilables. In any movement, about 5% are the hardcore believers. And there are some believers in this ideology, you can't reason with them. But about 95% of them, if they have jobs, if you give them a better alternative, they'll be peaceful. And so when it comes to the irreconcilables, we have to do what we're doing now and what we've been doing, which is irreconcilables, you either put them in a cage or you put them in the ground. That's just the way it is. The rest of them there, the 95%, they're there for money, they're trying to survive, or because groups like ISIS are simply the strongest tribe. It's the best way to stay alive and to protect and provide for your family. Most human beings will choose unconditional love if their needs can be met. And this is interesting. I learned this about 10, 12 years ago. In the Palestinian territories, the Israelis placed the square root of 1% of the population in a perpetual state of peace to quell the intifada and make it easier for the moderates. So you basically had people that the Israelis put throughout the different territories. They just sat there and they meditated in a peaceful and relaxed state all day long. And when these people weren't doing that, there was violence, there was attacks. But when these people were meditating and keeping themselves in a peaceful and relaxed state, it was relatively peaceful. Pretty interesting. And there's another thing in radical Islam that we all should be aware of, and it's called taqiyya. It's Taqyya. And what it means is it says, as long as it furthers the cause of Islam, you can lie, you can deny your faith, you can cheat, you can steal, you can kill, as long as it furthers Islam. One of my favorite quotes from Ronald Reagan, he says, trust but verify. So if you have somebody who has, I mean, you look at someone like who was recently elected, what's his name? Forget his name. He's the mayor of London now. He's a Muslim. And so a lot of people that ran against him, because he shared the stage on several occasions with radical Islamists, I should say, preachers that want to stone adulterers, that want to murder gays, that want to forcefully impose Sharia. How many times have you heard me say, like attracts like? You are who you associate with. And so this particular guy who's now the Muslim mayor of London, he says, no, I'm totally secular. You know, it was a mistake. I should have never shared the stage with those guys. You know, sorry, sorry, sorry. Great. Trust but verify. We'll give him the benefit of the doubt, but we look at his actions. And you know what's interesting? And just this past week, under body shaming, he wants all sexualized images of men and women banned from the subways and from the buses. He says it's because he doesn't want his teenage daughters to feel any kind of shame. I have a problem with that. So I look at his actions. He's been in office for like 2 weeks now. So, again, taqiyya. Look at what he does. Now, I don't give a fuck what he says or what he says it is. I'm going to look at what he does. And that looks oppressive. That's oppressive to women.
That's, to me, seeking to impose his morality on the rest of us. Pay attention. And if someone says they're all about moderate Islam, you look at like this organization CAIR, C-A-I-R, which stands for Council on Islamic American Relations, Obama works really closely with them. And what's interesting is they have gotten terms like Sharia. They've totally sanitized all the FBI's materials and the Department of Homeland Security's materials. Anything that talks about Sharia law or any of the terms that the radical Islamists use, that our people in government were using to determine who do we go after, what ideology, who are the people we need to be concerned with, and who are the moderates that we don't need to worry about. The world is waiting and it's ripe for a leader. Russia wants to get the band back together again, if you will, that destroyed the Nazis, because they have the same problem. The Chinese, they have the same fucking problem. And what's interesting is a lot of guys in the military, the U.S. military, they're happy that the Russians stepped in Syria. Their attitude is fucking get some. Because for the most part, our president has completely tied the hands of the military. ISIS is using Hollywood-style quality in their propaganda videos that is good enough to convince people to kill themselves and others in the process. Every day that ISIS is allowed to exist, it has credibility to influence suicidal, self-hating, self-loathing people to kill, turn against their families and countries, and become traitors. That is a weapon of war. Like it or not, we're at fucking war. Their propaganda is turning our own citizens against us to commit mass murder. And we're talking about gun control. Fucking asinine stupidity. Guns need to be anywhere and everywhere because the federal government and Barack Obama himself just admitted on June 16th that they can't catch everyone. All veterans and responsible gun owners should get concealed carry permits and be ready. It's the prudent thing to do, since as Barack Obama himself has said, they can't protect all of us. We have to do what's necessary to win the war and stop crazy people from murdering. The thing you never hear in the media, there is never any talk of defensive gun use. You never hear about the guy that stopped the holdup or the guy that pulled his gun and blew away the robber. You never hear about it. It's never talked about in the news. The only thing you hear about is when somebody uses a gun to kill somebody or to shoot somebody. And you should go, why is that? Why is it in the media they never talk about defensive gun use? You can see all kinds of videos on YouTube and the internet of old guys pulling guns and shooting and mowing down killers and people that are seeking to rob. But the only thing you hear about, well, you know, if there'd have been a couple people in that nightclub with guns, a lot more people would have died. That is fucking asininely stupid, and that is just simply not reflective of reality. But again, you got to ask yourself, why do people in the media never talk about defensive gun use ever? It's against their narrative. And remember, most people that work in the media that are giving you your news and information, they tend to be on the left side of the aisle, if you will. That's the same thing with our president. He doesn't believe people should own guns. He's an ideologue. He believes in his ideology. That's why his fallback position is always, if we just ban guns, it'll solve the problem. Well, if that was something that would work, you would never have had all those people mowed down in Paris by AK-47s when an AK-47 is completely illegal to buy, purchase, sell, or possess in all of France. Criminals are always going to get guns. We should do what the NRA has been advocating. No guns for people on a terrorist watch list. However, there must be a system of legal due process, because if you look at the no-fly list, lots of people get put on the no-fly list because their name as closely matches somebody that's on there.
And there's no way to get off it. There's no legal due process to get off of it. And the reason there needs to be due process is so people in power don't abuse it, which they've always done. In other words, oh, I think that guy's dangerous, we'll just put him on the terrorist watch list. Then he can't buy a gun, can't do anything. Before you know it, half the country will be on the terrorist watch list. So I'm all in favor of that. But again, at the end of the day, 3D printing, criminal networks, people are going to get guns. There's nothing you can do about it. It's best to assume that a criminal is going to get a gun. And we need to be looking for the people most likely to commit the crimes. And these are FBI statistics here. I actually saw this in 60 Minutes last year, and you can watch the video. It's Anderson Cooper was interviewing the FBI. And this is about active shooters. 60% of active shooter events are over before the police arrive. They almost always are over in 10 minutes or less. The best police response time is 5 to 7 minutes tops. The FBI says your choices are, in an active shooter event, run, hide, or fight. They say the best option is to take the shooter out. This is the FBI. You have a 1 in 2 million chance of getting shot, and you have a 1 in 700,000 chance of getting hit by lightning. So in other words, the potential for you to be in a place like what happened with this nightclub shooting is 1 in 2 million. The odds are really fucking low. But if you find yourself in one of those positions, it's better to fight back. I mean, those people in Paris, the Bataclan Theater, the people all surrendered to them, and they had them all on the dance floor, and they just went around and put a bullet in each one of their heads, just executed them. It was a mass execution. And for the most part, that's what happened in the Pulse Nightclub. People gave up, and the guy just mowed them down. Nobody fought back, and nobody had the chance to fight back. Moderate Muslims must always be the strongest tribes and be supported, trained, equipped, mentored by the U.S. military and educated in our schools. As far as our military presence in the Middle East, we should be like Casper the Friendly Ghost. We should work in the shadows. And for the most part, that's what we're doing now, with a light military footprint. That's what kept Egypt together and secular to overcome the Muslim Brotherhood during the revolution. Remember when 30 million Egyptian citizens were on the street? It was the largest protest in human history. When they had their fill of the Muslim Brotherhood, and Obama was saying, no, it's a democratically elected government. You know, he was all upset when al-Sisi stepped in. And you say, well, why didn't Egypt end up like Yemen or Iraq or Syria? You want to know why? Because the U.S. military and our values were adopted by the Egyptian military and the Egyptian leadership. Many of them, I'd say probably the overwhelming majority of upper echelon military leaders in Egypt are educated in the United States, and they're trained by our military. And people should be grateful that Egypt did not implode. You know what the most respected institution in Egypt is? The military. Since the 1970s, the U.S. military and our allies have been mentoring, training, equipping, and advising the Egyptian military. We've instilled our values in them. And there's, al-Sisi, who is the leader of Egypt presently, he's a hardcore Muslim. He totally believes in Islam. But he also is a secularist. And he respects the rights of other Christians and other religions to peacefully coexist in their country. And we have our troops, and our troops in the West and our allies to thank for that. And most people have no fucking idea that that even happened. If you look at their tanks, they're driving the M1A1 main battle tank. There's an evil force loose in the world, and it has to be dealt with, just like the Nazis. It ain't going away. We can't wish it away. Positive thinking ain't going to make it go away. It's simply the way it is. We need a Marshall Plan for the Middle East. After World War II was over, we had what's called the Marshall Plan, where it's basically the Allies rebuilt Europe. In other words, we made sure they had a stable currency system, a stable monetary system, a stable banking system. Property rights and ownership was protected. We made sure that they had competent local, state, and federal governments and security. And Europe totally recovered. We can't just kill a bunch of people, take out the Islamists, and say, great, good luck, you're on your own. That's what Obama did in Libya. Decapitated the regime and just went, great, good luck, you're on your own, hope it works out for you. Got nothing but love for you. And he just walked away, and what happened? Right now, the estimates are 5,000 to 8,000 ISIS fighters in Libya. We're going to be there for decades, whether we like it or not. We don't have a fucking choice. Like Harry Truman said, it's amazing what you can accomplish if you do not care who gets the credit. We must have a Muslim face as the leadership of reforming Islam to get rid of radicalism once and for all. Guys like King Abdullah of Jordan, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi of Egypt, those guys need to be the leaders of this. Not the Americans, not the West. We need to be in the shadows, supporting them, backing them up, so it can be their face. It can be an Islamic, it can be a Muslim face on this. Radical Islam is a theopolitical belief system that has been fighting to rule the world since 622 AD. That is 1,394 years, which is temporary lulls in the fighting. And I love history. I've been studying it my whole life. Here's some, and I'll have on my website, I'll have some links to these. In 732 AD, Charles the Hammer Martel repels the Moors, which came up through Spain from North Africa, and saved Europe and Christianity from radical Islamic invasion. 732 AD. Europe was almost lost if it hadn't been for Charles Martel. I learned that in 9th grade. Most people go, Charles Martel? Who? What? The fall of Constantinople. What's Constantinople? You may have heard of it. It's Istanbul now. But at one time, that whole part of the Middle East was all Christian. Mosul, which is now under the control of the Islamic State, that originally was all Christian, that whole area. Christianity came along long before Islam had. Constantinople fell in 1453 because the Christians lost that fight, and Islam was imposed on them. That's why you had all these really old monasteries and churches in Mosul, Iraq, and a lot of them were blown up and destroyed. These things were these were like 15, 16, 17, 1800 years old, and they were blown up, wiped off the map. In 1571, the Christian Venetian fleet at Lepanto fought and decisively defeated an Ottoman Empire Muslim invading fleet. This decisive battle took place on the northern edge of the Gulf of Corinth off of western Greece. Again, I'll have links to that, and some of them will have videos and documentaries. If you're so inclined and interested, you can check it out. The Battle of Vienna. Germanic and Austrian knights fought at the gates of Vienna in 1683 in the Battle of Vienna. Another radical Islamic invasion of Europe. The Barbary Wars, which I discussed earlier, that was around 1800 to 1815, I believe. And you should read the Quran, the Sunnah, the Surah, and the Hadith if you really want to understand this ideology. It's not something new that just came along. This is something that has been a problem for 1,394 fucking years, which is slight lulls in the fighting. So that's my 2 cents on why it happened, why it continues to happen, and why we, as humanity, we have to deal with this. We cannot turn away from this. Definitely something to think about. Like it or not, you're either part of the solution or you're part of the problem.